Dead Age is a tactical RPG that was a perfect demonstration of why I should never be in a leadership position. Set during the onset of a zombie apocalypse, you take on the role of some random schmuck who must manage an encampment and the survivors who inhabit it. Alongside the metagame of assigning jobs and withholding food rations, there's also a system of turn-based tactical combat that is reminiscent of the old Final Fantasy games, where your leadership skills must take a turn for the aggressive as you command your violent thugs to face off against hordes of the undead as well as refugees from Coachella. The task of survival is not an easy one, facing internal divisions, external invasions, dwindling supplies, and a clunky user interface. You'll have your work cut out for you as you hit the road and try to stay alive at the start of the... Continuing our little diversion away from the normal content of this channel and exploring the wider gaming sphere, today we've got a tactical RPG called Dead Age. Developed by a small indie team called Silent Dreams, there's absolutely no development info that I could find anywhere, so I'm going to skip that entire spiel and just jump straight into talking about the game itself. Dead Age reminds me of three things. The first is obviously Final Fantasy in terms of the combat anyway. I'm not an expert on those games, but what little I've played of them definitely has me seeing parallels here, and that's a source of inspiration that is proudly flaunted by the devs on the Steam page. The second thing I was reminded of was Darkest Dungeon, with the whole emphasis on the metagame where you have to manage your party members and make sure everyone is good to go for the next suicide mission. The third and final thing it reminded me of was this old website I used to visit as a kid called XCom. It was basically an online repository that linked to every zombie-related freeware and flash game that you could find on the mid-2000s internet. If anyone's ever heard of an old game called Sunny, that was on there. Dead Age feels almost like a lost relic from that website, with the kind of cheap 3D graphics, clear low budget, and surprising amount of gameplay depth. Like many of the games from both that website and the genre as a whole, the story setup of Dead Age is simple and there's not much to it. You live in an unnamed American city, zombies show up and start eating people, all hell breaks loose, survive by any means necessary. The bare minimum of a narrative skeleton is given out here because that's not really where the game's ambitions lie. It's a means to an end to justify the gameplay and setting. Given that Dead Age touts itself as an RPG, you get the ability to create your own character, though I use the word create looser than the brake pads on my car here. The only thing you can really customize is your name and occupation, but every occupation save for one is locked on a first playthrough, so I actually only got to type my name into the text box and that was the extent of it. The default occupation for a first time playthrough is that of a student. I'm guessing college, since I haven't seen any high schoolers that look like this, but maybe it's just a generation gap sort of thing. Anyway, the point of the student role is that you don't shit for starting bonuses and can basically take your character sheet in any direction you want to go. Before I say a single word more, we have to take a moment to marvel at the physique of our character here. Was this dude a fucking linebacker or something? I don't know, but he definitely played college ball, probably University of Texas, definitely not some Beltway pansy. When I saw student as a role, I was expecting some scrawny fucker who sits in his dorm all day and uses a VPN to watch Azerbaijan Netflix or some shit, but this looks like the type of dude who deadlifts car engines and then goes outside and eats an old lady trying to cross the road. Whatever, here's what the gameplay looks like. Like I said, pretty similar to Final Fantasy, except there's guns, so it's kind of the same deal as the Civil War, where people just lined up down a field and took pot shots at one another. Actually, isn't there a Final Fantasy with guns? I can't remember. As far as the combat goes, it's about how you would expect it to work. I think there's some kind of initiative system, but I couldn't really tell, and for the most part, outside of a couple rare cases, the way it worked was that I got a turn where I could use one action from each of my characters, and then the same thing happened on the CPU side. You can take all the standard actions during a turn, stuff like attacking enemies, healing your guys, and debuffing enemies or setting up reaction attacks. There's not a crazy amount of different abilities available to you, but there's enough to give the combat some depth and keep it fun and tense. As for how I decided to spec out my character, I did something a little different. Normally, I like to use guns in most video games, but for the sake of trying something new, I made a character that was dedicated to melee weapons, which turned out to be a good idea since melee characters get some pretty good abilities in this game. Obviously, there's the standard attack where you just bonk a motherfucker on the head, but there's also this spinning hit that lowers an enemy's defense, this double hit attack that seemed very inconsistent, and my personal favorite, a move called the Eliminator, where your guy does a sweep kick and can knock an enemy down. Since my main character was dedicated to close quarters combat, I thought it would be logical to have pretty much every other character be dedicated towards either guns or healing. On the topic of skill customization, let's talk about the metagame, because that's where all this takes place. That guitar riff plays whenever you level up, in case you are wondering. So in addition to the combat, the other half of the game is made up of you managing all of your resources at this camp. In the initial encounter of the game, you meet 2 other survivors, the Sheriff and Trish, who make you like the fucking leader of the group for some reason. Boy, does that turn out to be a mistake. This part of the game is all about managing your consistently tight amount of resources in order to keep everyone alive and healthy. Everyone has to stay fed, otherwise they start losing health, everyone has to stay working, otherwise you run out of resources for raid, and everyone has to stay happy, otherwise you won't be able to take them on missions or assign them jobs around camp. The system isn't too complicated, but the management of supplies can get really tricky. You have a very limited pool of resources to use. Assigning some to a job uses up rations, which are already consumed ambiently by your party members, so food goes quickly. You have materials, which are used both as currency for the shop and to make items that you need, which puts those in short supply. Finally, there's tools, which can be used for both crafting and hunting, which makes a scarce resource even scarcer. Maybe I'm just an idiot, but there was no point in my playthrough where I had an abundance of any of these things. On the one hand, I can see how this is a good thing, something that enhances the game's atmosphere of desperation and gives the player the feeling of just barely scraping by, plus the whole challenge of managing a limited pool of resources. But because that pool is so limited, you're pretty much one mistake away from completely nuking your run. To sum it up as concisely as possible, the combat is Final Fantasy with the serial number shaved off and replaced with the download code for Dawn of the Dead in 720p and with Turkish subtitles, and the management part is basically Broke Bitch Simulator. That's the best way I can sum it up anyway. Things started off okay enough. Resources were tight, but my camp was getting by, and I was starting to build up a good size, with a number of different survivors of varying talents. We've got a nurse named Liz, some guy named Hank, a shotgun-toting firefighter named Bill, a cop named Jennifer, and not one, but 2 guys from the military, James and Jamal. There's more people you can recruit, but it was at this point in the run that things started to quickly deteriorate for me. You see, the structure of the missions is kinda similar to a dungeon crawler. There's different regions you can explore for supplies and to complete quests, with about 20 encounters with enemies at a minimum in each one before you reach the end. What happens at the end of each section? I have no idea, since I never got that far. Before you set off on an expedition, you have to assign the people who are staying behind jobs to do. Here's where I fucked up. One of the most important jobs to assign is security, since that's how you keep zombies and bandits from attacking the camp. The penalties for not doing this are extremely harsh, so it's basically a requirement to always have at least one person on watch. When I was going to do a mission though, I fucked up and misclicked, leaving the base before assigning anyone to guard it. So when I came back, I found out that zombies had attacked the camp and killed Bill, who was one of my best characters. Let me repeat, a single misclick insta-killed one of my best party members. This is the exact moment where my entire playthrough started to fall apart. With one less man at base, I had basically no extra survivors to juggle around for tasks, meaning that I couldn't get anyone to manufacture supplies because I need at least one person hunting for rations and one person guarding the base, with me switching people out after each mission. Problem: whenever the base got attacked, the person guarding it would basically always get fucked up and within like an inch of dying, meaning that after each mission, I would have 4 party members, including my guy, who were unable to go on missions. This meant that I wasn't able to do expeditions, which meant that I wasn't able to get supplies needed to make gear, ammo, and healing. On top of this, keeping everyone at base every other day ate into the food resource, which meant people started to go hungry and lose health, and the sheriff wouldn't stop pestering me about getting more food. I love his expression in Thai image, by the way. Thai? Why the fuck does Google want me to say that? Is it just me, or has spell check on Google Docs become the most useless thing in technology since they started investing in this Gemini bullshit? Anyway, what I was originally gonna say is that I just love the way he looks in this picture. He's like, where's all the fucking food, bro? We need food, we need it to eat, and I'm getting hungry, so where's the fucking food? Did that fat ass eat all of it to eat the food? Now I'm a hungry motherfucker. I also got this pop-up that was a message from the developers asking me to leave a Steam review, since they're a small indie studio, and that kind of thing actually really helps them. I thought this was really nice, since it's a good reminder that the games that we play have human beings making them who need our support so they can continue to do what they love and pursue this creative endeavor. I clicked no. Back to the playthrough and everyone's starting to drop like flies. Hank got killed by bandits or some shit, I don't really remember. Liz got pissed at Trish and tried to stab her during a cat fight, so I had to tell her to go pound sand. I went on an epic mission into the city with Jamal, who got word that his wife was trapped there. This was one of the hardest raids in the game, a grueling journey into the heart of the dead city. After fighting through encounter after encounter, we found the house where his wife was last seen. Unfortunately, we were too late and she was dead, which drove Jamal into a rage rage and led him to nearly sacrifice himself to distract the horde. I convinced him that life was still worth living though, and we fought off the encroaching undead. After that battle, we returned to camp where Jamal told me that he had found a renewed sense of purpose in life as a member of the group, after which he immediately starved to death because we were out of food. I'm fucking serious, by the way. Whatever, I figured the game was close to over at this point since I got a quest from the sheriff to go with him to the desert to look for an escape route. We were ambushed by bandits though, and I had to fight through the sandy plains in what was clearly the final encounter of the game, trying to get from one end to the other to confront the leader of the marauders who had been attacking me the whole game. No supplies, no backup, but I kept on trucking, making use of every dirty trick I knew to just barely survive each encounter. Also, this dude named Terrence just randomly showed up in my party. I don't know who the hell he is, but fuck it, here's an AK I found, buddy, let's get to work. With my new friend's help, I confronted the punk's leader and bested him in direct combat. After all the loss, the difficulty, the blood, sweat, and tears, that was it. The last climactic battle. Why the fuck is the game still going? Oh my god, there's more. I don't have any fucking food. Alright, now apparently we're waiting for some military broadcast to tell us when rescue is coming or some shit, which meant that we had to take a final journey into the city. I asked Jennifer if she wanted to go on a date because the game gave me the option to, but the last time I talked to a woman was when I almost got scammed on a dating app, so my swooning skills are a little rusty. Hey girl, what you know about Azerbaijani Netflix? Also, it was either go on the date or do a mission that was essential to progression, so I ended up standing her ass up, which didn't seem to bother her that much, which makes sense because the plan was to get a pack of Fent 30s and curl up in front of the TV and watch a 60s version of Kidnapping Caucasian Style, which I'm told isn't something that most women these days are into. I think the problem is with them, not me. What the fuck ever. I'm a leader. I ain't got time for romance. I have to lead my people on the actual final mission, a bombastic blitz into the center of the city where a military helicopter is going to land and take us to safety. This made the desert look like a cakewalk, intense street-to-street fighting against wave after wave of ravenous revenants. In the end though, we just barely made it off the landing zone, and the fucking plane got shot down, and there's still more? How fucking long is this game? So, when we got back, bandits or zombies or whoever attacked and killed Jenny, which, whatever, bitch stole my cart night, so I don't care. It's just me, James, and Terry now in a 3-man goon squad that has no food, no ammo, and no need for any of that shit since it's actually time for the last mission. Back to the desert to find some lab or something. It went pretty disastrously. Terry got eaten, and me and James were completely out of health and ammo, so I just said screw it and went back to base, resigned to whatever was awaiting me, which turned out to be an airstrike that killed us all. I got an achievement for getting an ending, so I'm considering this one finished. Except, wait, upgrades? What upgrades do I need? I'm dead. Bonuses for another playthrough? It's a roguelike? Huh. I guess it is. Fuck that though, I put 10 hours into this and I'm ready to move on to the next thing. Not because I didn't enjoy this game, I did, but because having to engage in the most drawn-out virtual failure I've ever suffered was kind of exhausting. There's a sequel out now, and a third game on the way, so I'll probably come back and try and get the good ending if I ever play those, but for now I think I've had enough. If you're into stuff like XCom or Darkest Dungeon though, then you'll probably get some enjoyment out of this. It doesn't really have the same depth that those games do, but it's still pretty fun and can scratch that itch if you already have like 1,000,000 hours in those games. Now, if you'll excuse me, there's a zombie apocalypse going, and I've got to avoid being eaten by the ravenous hordes. Unfortunately, I've run out of food since going to Dollar General costs like $1,000 now, so I'll just starve instead. You know how it is. Hey everybody, if you made it this far into the video, I just want to say thanks. It means a whole lot. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all your standard YouTube outro stuff. And a big thank you to the patrons over on Patreon, Spec Teams 1 Slingshots and Joe Sneaks, as well as the members here on YouTube, Saiga and Grungles. Thanks a lot, y'all. And other than that, I'll see y'all in the next video. Goodbye.